Hey there, welcome to the Treasured Wellness Show. Grab your mug of herbal tea, a notebook, and your Bible, and we will dive right in. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Treasured Wellness Show. I'm your host, Michelle, and if this is your first time, a big welcome to you. This is a show where we talk about all things women's health. We will do some deep dives. We'll talk about really anything that's pertinent to women's health, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. So I'm so glad you are here. And today I am talking about a really important topic that most women really struggle with. This is something I have struggled with off and on for many years. And this is, I guess I would say I could safely say this is the number one complaint that I hear from women who I work with, and that is fatigue. That is that almost debilitating type feeling of fatigue that comes over you, and what do you do about it? So I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to kind of give a dictionary definition of what fatigue really is, and it's essentially weariness or exhaustion from labor, exertion, or stress, and this can be on a physical or a mental level. So we've all felt that, right? We've all had a really long day or a really long week at work, and we are just mentally done, like we are just zapped. And when we are so mentally fatigued, it greatly affects us physically too. Like, how many of us want to come home from working a 9-hour day and then go hit the gym for an hour when we have had a really stressful day? Well, not many of us. Some of us do. Some of us just love that exercise routine and they don't want to miss it for anything. But often when we are so emotionally or mentally drained, it greatly impacts how we feel physically, which is why we tend to numb out on the couch watching Netflix or just scrolling on our phone because we're so tired. And we have no energy to do anything. Like, it's all we can do to, if we have children still at the house, put the kids to bed, fix them dinner, put them to bed, do the normal evening things that we have to do, but we're just so worn out. So we're not really helping ourselves by just vegging out and zoning out with Netflix. But at the same time, if we don't have the energy, we don't have the energy. It's really hard to force ourselves to do something. I want to talk about regular fatigue, which is really essentially sleepiness. Like, you're just tired. It's just tired. You are sleepy because you maybe didn't sleep well the night before, or you've had a couple of days of not sleeping very well, and you're just kind of yawning throughout the day. You're just really sleepy. You just know that you just need a really good night's sleep, and then you'll be okay. Or maybe if you are really fatigued from exercise, like if you did a really hard workout and you are fatigued from that, that's different. That's like tired, that's muscle fatigue. That is different than something more severe like chronic fatigue or adrenal fatigue. And actually, chronic fatigue is actually characterized by extreme fatigue that is lasting 6 months or more. Now, here's the kicker. It's very difficult to diagnose. And really, women are roughly 2 to 4 times more likely to have chronic fatigue than men. And again, it's difficult to diagnose. So you could be going through years of feeling fatigued and really just pushing yourself and going through the motions before anything is discovered that might be off or wrong. So adrenal fatigue is where your adrenals are simply depleted from, it could be anything. It could be constant stress. You could be constantly in that fight or flight mode for a while where you don't see a way out anytime soon. You could be going through like a physical sickness that is depleting your resources. And so that is kind of putting pressure on your adrenals. And you want to be sure that you are really in tune with your body. You're really paying attention to what your body is trying to tell you. Because you've heard this, I'm sure. Like, if you don't listen to your body when it's kind of fussing at you and saying, hey, you need to take a break, you need to take a break. You keep pushing through, being that machine that you feel you must be, then your body will start yelling at you. And then it starts squawking at you. And then before you know it, boom, you're in the bed because you're done. You have nothing. You either get really sick, you get hit with a virus, you get hit with anything. You all of a sudden are picking up your kids and your grandkids' colds that they're bringing home from school or whatever. Just all of a sudden, like, you might think, gosh, I never used to get sick this much. Well, your immune system has been weakened because you are just pushing through, and you're not taking that time to really rest. So, in addition to chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue is also difficult to diagnose, and oftentimes practitioners and doctors will kind of kick the can down the road. This is a really big pet peeve of mine. So it's important that we understand as women what's going on in our body, and that we understand how to ask the questions, what to ask for, what to research, and just kind of take that information to our appointment, because otherwise you might leave the office not feeling heard. You might leave the office with more questions than you have answers. And while it's almost like a quick relief that you are going to be having some labs done, like they'll say, let's draw some labs, it quickly can turn into disappointment yet again when you get those labs back and your doctor says everything's fine, you're normal, everything looks normal, but something isn't right. That you still feel like crap. That you are still exhausted. And that's why it's so important that you are your own best advocate for your health. Nobody else. Doctors only give you 8 to 15 minutes, if you're lucky, in an appointment. So it's important that we make good use of that time that we're in there by knowing what to ask, how to ask for the help that we need, what labs to ask for, all of those things. And that is something that I help women with often because I've lived it for many years, and it's so frustrating to walk out of your appointment that you had to wait probably anywhere from 6 months to a year to get into, and you still don't have the answers, and you have to wait till your next appointment. It's just, we need to take back our health. We need to put the ball back in our own court, and we need to take control, because God does not want his daughters to be sick. He does not want his daughters to be stuck in this vicious cycle of feeling sick and sad and stuck, just a feeling of being stuck. It's not a good feeling, is it? So let me talk a little bit about adrenal fatigue, because the adrenals are actually walnut-sized glands that kind of sit above your kidneys, and they are pumping out the cortisol. They are part of the endocrine system, and they are pumping out the cortisol, which is why when you are under extreme stress, your body is pumping out all of the cortisol and you're exhausted, because it's helping you to get through that fire. I always call it a fire, but it's helping you to get through that emergency that's going on in your life. It's protecting you. And this is often why people that are going through a season of challenge, they feel like they're okay. They're like, I'm good. Like, I don't know how I'm making it through. I know the Lord's helping me get through, but I'm really okay. And then when the crisis is over, their body, it just crashes. And that's because your body was protecting you during the fire, during the extreme, whatever it was, trauma or tension or stress or whatever it was. And then when the emergency is over, your body's like, whew, okay, I need a break. Like, I need a break. The kicker is if we don't give it a break, then it can cause us to become even sicker or sick. So adrenal fatigue, some symptoms in addition to feeling like extreme tiredness, you could start having just to kind of help you to get an idea of like, well, how would I know if I have adrenal fatigue? You might start having some hair loss. Your hair might start coming out as you are showering. You might find that your hair is coming out almost in clumps. You are possibly having more cold. You're feeling cold more often. Maybe your blood pressure is dropping very low, and you are noticing that because when you stand up from laying down, or sometimes even sitting for a while, you get dizzy, you get lightheaded, you just feel a little off balance. So that can be an indicator. Having an irregular heartbeat or heart palpitations frequently, especially during times of stress, and you might start noticing after you have caffeine or sugar that you're having more heart palpitations. That's a symptom. More headaches, and salt cravings. If you're starting to crave salt, if you're having those cravings for salt, and so you're eating more carbohydrates, more chips, more popcorn, things like that. And one of the most interesting symptoms, at least for me, was a rushing sound. You get a rushing sound in your ears. So that's when you are really like, okay, something's not right. Like some rushing sound in your ears, like that's not normal, is it? But those are some symptoms of having adrenal fatigue. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my story. I'm not going to take a lot of time to go into this. Maybe one day I will, but I do want to share a little bit about my story because it really shaped me. You know, God uses every situation for our good and His glory. And I believe that is so true. So my adrenal fatigue started years and years and years ago, off and on. Like it would come and it would go. I would be aware of it a little bit. I'm like, something's not off. And this, of course, is after I became holistically trained and I was aware. Before that, who knows? I'm sure I can look back and recount like certain situations in my 30s where I was suffering from adrenal fatigue and I just didn't know it. I just kept pushing my body like, using it like a machine and just keeping on. But once I realized what I was looking at, I would take the necessary steps to step back, rest a little bit, maybe give myself a little extra healthy nutrition, a little supplementation, go to bed earlier, things like that. And it was okay. I would rebound and I would be okay for a little while, and then I would crash again and I would rebound. And it was like a vicious cycle. The problem is I was also going through some hypothyroid symptoms as well. So that is kind of a challenge that I'll talk about in a second, but because they mimic each other, these symptoms can mimic each other. So it's a little bit of a challenge for sure. But what really got me was when I went through a 3-year fire. Like I said, I call them fires. And it lasted for so long. It was almost like a daily fight or flight or freeze situation. I couldn't see my way out, and it was just really excruciating emotionally. So going through that and living it for so long really depleted my adrenals. It wreaked havoc on my thyroid, and the thyroid and the adrenals work very closely together. And so it really kind of did a number on me. So I guess maybe a little over a year and a half now, I was really struggling. And this is about the time when God was telling me it's time to quit your job. And then that kind of was a little more element of stress, even though I wanted to be obedient. I was ready. it was a little terrifying, right? So that kind of put me into a little, okay, God, I'm trusting you. I'm doing this, but what's next? And I kind of threw myself into what I thought God was telling me was next. I missed the boat, however, on the rest part. He was really calling me to take time and rest. But instead, I quit my job and I threw myself into the next thing that I thought he wanted me to do. And he did. I was right that he wanted me to do that, but he wanted me to take an interim. He wanted me to take a break and rest. And I kept getting my signals crossed. I kept feeling like I needed to be completely obedient, 100%, and just plow into this thing that he wanted me to do with the podcast and with the coaching business. And in the meantime, I mean, I'm just being completely open and honest and transparent. Like, I'm an open book. You ask me anything and I'll tell you, because I believe we all can learn from other people's situations. But it really put me into a deficit, a cortisol deficit, because my body finally just was like, no more, you're done. And I got really sick and I was struggling. So I say all that to say everybody is different in how they present their symptoms. Your fatigue symptoms might be completely different from your sister's or your best friend or somebody you read about their situation online. It could be totally different from mine. But don't discount how you are feeling because it doesn't have a diagnosis title, because you haven't been officially diagnosed. No, you know how you feel. And again, this comes back to you are your own best advocate for your health, because the problem is we put so much stock in what our doctor might say and we can disregard what our body's telling us. We have to be very careful. It's a fine line. And I'm not saying, every time you're tired, God's telling you to rest. I mean, maybe he is, right? Only you can determine that. Or that every time you're really fatigued, if you've been tired for more than 5 days, like, okay, maybe it's adrenal fatigue. Not saying that either. You have to be tracking. You have to be aware of what's going on with your body. And you have to ask yourself some questions. Like, am I just really tired because of bad night's sleep? I'm not eating well. Like, what's going on? Or, gosh, you know what? Looking back, I've been exhausted for months. And so you want to start tracking. This is how it's going to help you. We're so busy that if we don't track, it's easy to kick the can down the road. And before you know it, years have gone by. Trust me on this. I've been there. I've done that. I should have created a t-shirt because it is really easy as women to just keep pushing. And our own health is suffering as we go. And before you know it, the years have gone by and we have had 5 years where we have totally felt like crap. And it doesn't have to be. It does not have to be that way. You do not have to feel like crap just because you're a certain age. Okay? Let me give you that assurance. You absolutely can feel in good health, well in mind, body, spirit, soul, and you can absolutely embrace this life that God has for you in an abundant way. So that's why I just feel strongly that you are your own best advocate. So first off, you have to track. You have to track everything so that you have a good idea. And the other thing, I said I would talk about the thyroid. So I was diagnosed with hypothyroid, and that just means that my thyroid was not functioning at an optimal level. It was too low. And so your thyroid is essentially your master hormone. Like, that is a big deal. So usually most doctors won't, they may or may not, right, depending on the doctor, check even your TSH. But TSH is not the gold standard. I mean, that's what they always do, but there's so many more tests you can do that give a better picture of the thyroid. So, and I'm not going to get into conventional lab ranges versus functional lab ranges, because there are some great differences between those. But listen to some of these symptoms for hypothyroid and see how they mimic what I mentioned for adrenal fatigue. Being cold, having low blood pressure, having hair loss, clumps of hair coming out. I remember I would have literally a clump of hair I would put on the shower wall after I washed my hair every time. And sometimes it was like really large, and it just, you're like, what's going on? Why am I losing all this hair? Trouble sleeping, not being able to sleep well, not being able to fall asleep, or having a hard time staying asleep, waking up in the middle of the night and then having a really hard time falling back asleep. Weight gain, fatigue, just that feeling of heaviness, that heavy fatigue feeling. You're clearing your throat often. You're finding that you're hoarse, and maybe your hair and your nails are brittle as well. They're breaking more often. You are finding that you are sick more often. Your immune system is lower. Depression, anxiety, more feelings of stress, and even low libido. Those are some symptoms of hypothyroidism. So you can see how some of them also mimic the adrenal fatigue. It's really important that we, again, are tracking what our body is telling us. Tracking. It's your whole health journal is what I call it, because you're going to be tracking not just what you're eating, you're going to be tracking how you're eliminating, how you are feeling energy-wise, how your sleep is, how your movement is. And I like to talk about fun, healthy movement, not necessarily in terms of hamster wheel exercise, but that fun, healthy movement. And you want to be sure that you are putting anything and everything in there that might be a question, might raise a red flag. Then if you are going to an appointment and you are setting up that appointment because you are fatigued, you've got just a lot of, you've been tracking it and you're just not feeling your best, and you're like, listen, something's not right. I want to get an appointment. I want to get a checkup and find out what's going on, have some lab work. Then you might want to consider specific labs, like a full thyroid panel, which is going to include a TSH, a T4, free T4. You've got your free and reverse T3. To go a little deeper, check your TPO antibodies and TGO antibodies, and that way you can find out if you can rule some things out too. Because beyond hypothyroid and thyroid issues, a person could also develop Hashimoto's. So it's just something to be aware of, and you want to keep up on this. You want to keep up on how your body is signaling to you what's going on. You also might want to consider a vitamin D panel. Find out what's going on. What are your vitamin D levels? Oftentimes, people are just really struggling with energy and fatigue, and it's a simple vitamin D deficiency. We are inside under these lights more often than we're outside getting some sunlight. And with this age of sunscreen and everything, that forms a barrier, so the sun is not able to truly get into our skin to give us that vitamin D that we really need. So it's really good to have some sun to skin contact. Even in the winter, I would remember I would bundle up. I still do this. I bundle up, put a blanket over me or something, and go sit on the front porch, because that's where the sun is shining in the afternoon in the winter. So it's warmer, a little bit warmer, but I've got that sun. And even if it's just on my hands and my face, I'm getting some sun to skin contact. And that's really important. So you want to just, consider, hey, what are my vitamin D levels? Low vitamin D is actually very closely related to some mental disorders like depression, anxiety, ADHD, a lot of mental disorder. So it's linked. So there is something to be said for having that tested often. And again, you might have to ask for this. So the other things you might want to consider is an iron panel or ferritin or B12, just to see where your levels are there. Because again, if you are struggling with energy, you could be deficient in your B vitamins. And you can try to make changes dietarily, of course. I highly recommend doing that before supplementation, but it's good to have that baseline of what are your labs showing. We want to test. We don't want to guess. We don't want to just start throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. Oh, well, I started taking vitamin D and I feel better, but that may just be a covering of a bigger problem. So it's important to know what you're dealing with. Once we know what we're dealing with, we can handle anything, right? So I just wanted to touch on that. Different types of, of course, there are the different types of fatigue, the chronic, the adrenal, and fatigue as a symptom to other dis-ease or disease. So it's important to really, again, listen to your body, journal what it's telling you, and just keep track. Just keep a log. Doesn't mean you have to be journaling for the rest of your life, but it is important when things feel off that you pick it back up and you just see. And don't throw your journals out, because it's really good to keep them from year to year to see where, what you were doing, what changes you made. If you veer off track, it's good to be able to look at that and say, oh yeah, that's what I was doing. I was doing this every day. Oh, I remember I felt really good. And it's a great accountability tool for yourself. Okay, so I wanted to read Matthew 11:28 through 30, because if you are struggling, this could be a whole other conversation, and I will definitely talk about this. But if you are struggling with taking time for yourself to rest, I just want this to give you some encouragement. Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So he's telling us to come. He's telling us to come to him, and he will carry our load. And that's pretty comforting, isn't it? Because our loads are heavy. We are in this world with so much expectation on us. And Jesus is saying, no, let me take some of that expectation off of you. Follow me, and I will give you rest. And then Mark 6 verse 31. So this is where the apostles were tired and they were weary. And in verse 30, it says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. 32, so they went away in the boat by themselves to a remote place. So Jesus says, come away and rest. He's saying, come away and rest. I see how busy you are. I see your burdens. I see how you're, burning the candle at both ends. I see how you are not getting enough sleep. I see how you are, serving and working and doing. And it's time to come away and rest and pour into yourself a little bit. It's okay to do that. It's going to help your adrenals. It's going to help you mentally. It's going to help you physically. It's going to help you spiritually. So come away. And what I love about it is he didn't just send them away. He came away. He said, come away with me, essentially. Like he went with them, and he is our true rest. Jesus is our true rest. So take him with you, come away, rest. And I hope this blessed you in some way. I hope it gave you some encouragement. And again, if you are really struggling with your fatigue, click on the link to get that free Foggy and Fatigue Blueprint, because that will give you 3 days of intentional action steps and some recipes that are delicious that it will help you to regain your energy in a natural way. Okay? So go ahead and grab that. And if you need to hop on a call with me, you can do that as well, and we can talk through your specific health situation. Let me just take a minute and pray over you. Father God, we thank you so much that you do call us to come away and rest with you. And we thank you so much that we can find our true rest in you, and that you will carry our heavy load and our heavy burden. We thank you so much for that. And help us today to really lean into that. Help us to focus on the rest that you can give us, only you, Jesus. And we just thank you and we love you. In your holy name we pray. Amen. All right. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.